Right, so, previously on The Hound of the Baskervilles. Welcome to Book Club.
Welcome here in Corkle.
Holmes and Watson have met Dr. Mortimer, who is an absent-minded gent who tried to visit the previous day and left his stick behind. He's since returned and told them a story, both about the death of an 18th century roisterer and bastard, which is the guy who everybody was on the side of the Hound with, whose actions allegedly cursed his entire family line, to die at the, I'm not going to say hands, at the fangs of a demonic hound, should they venture onto the moor after dark. And when Holmes basically said, yes, very interesting, and Dr. Mortimer then produced an account of the inquest into the death of one Sir Charles Baskerville. Hey, Molly, descendant of said line, most recent incumbent of the title, who indeed died in his back garden near the Moorgate at night, having apparently started walking on tiptoe away from the house, and around his body were found by Dr. Mortimer, but not by the police, the marks of a gigantic hound. So, that's where we are. It's me trying to go headset free and it looks weird. So, if everybody is sitting comfortably, then I shall have another drink actually, and then I shall begin. Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound. And then they locked up. Thanks for that. I confess at these words a shudder passed through me. There was a thrill in the doctor's voice which showed that he was himself deeply moved by that which he told us. Holmes leaned forwards in his excitement, and his eyes had that hard, dry glitter which shot from them when he was keenly interested. You saw this, as clearly as I see you. And you said nothing. What was the use? How was it that no one else saw it? The marks were some 20 yards from the body, and no one gave them a thought. I don't suppose I should have done so had I not known about this legend. There are many sheepdogs on the moor? No doubt, but this was no sheepdog. You say it was large, enormous, but it did not approach the body. No. What sort of night was it? Damp and raw, but not actually raining? No. What is the alley like? There are 2 lines of old yew hedge, 12 feet high and impenetrable. The walk in the centre is about 8 feet across. Is there anything between the hedges and the walk? Yes, there is a strip of grass about 6 feet broad on either side. I understand that the yew hedge is penetrated at one point by a gate. Yes, the wicket gate which leads on to the moor. Is there any other opening? None. So that to reach the yew alley, one either has to come down it from the house, or else to enter by the Moorgate. There is an exit through a summer house at the far end. Had Sir Charles reached this? No, he lay about 50 yards from it. Now, tell me, Dr. Mortimer, and this is important, the marks which you saw were on the path and not on the grass. No marks could show on the grass. Were they on the same side of the path as the Moorgate? Yes, they were on the edge of the path on the same side as the Moorgate. You interest me exceedingly. Another point, was the wicket gate closed? Closed and padlocked. How high was it? About 4 feet. Then anyone could have got over it. Yes. And what marks did you see by the wicket gate? None in particular. Good heaven, did no one examine? Yes, I examined myself. And found nothing? It was all very confused. Sir Charles had evidently stood there for 5 or 10 minutes. How do you know that? Because the ash had twice dropped from his cigar. Excellent. This is a colleague, Watson, after our own heart. But the marks. He had left his own marks all over that small patch of gravel. I could discern no others. Sherlock Holmes struck his hand against his knee with an impatient gesture. If I had only been there, he cried. It is evidently a case of extraordinary interest, and one which presented immense opportunities to the scientific expert. That gravel page upon which I might have read so much has been long ere since this, smudged by the rain and defaced by the clogs of curious peasants. No, Dr. Mortimer, to think that you should not have called me in. You have indeed much to answer for. I could not call you in, Mr. Holmes, without disclosing these facts to the world, and I have already given my reasons for not wishing to do so. Besides, why do you hesitate? There is a realm in which the most acute and experienced of detectives is helpless. You mean that the thing is supernatural? I did not positively say so. No, but you evidently think it. Since the tragedy, Mr. Holmes, there have come to my ears several incidents which are hard to reconcile with the settled order of nature. For example? I find that before the terrible event occurred, several people had seen a creature upon the moor which corresponds with this Baskerville demon, and which could not possibly be any animal known to science. They all agreed that it was a huge creature, luminous, ghastly, and spectral. I've cross-examined these men, one of them a hard-headed countryman, one a farrier, and one a moorland farmer, who all tell the same story of this dreadful apparition, exactly corresponding to the Hound of the legend. I assure you there is a reign of terror in the district, and it is a hardy man who will cross the moor at night. And you, a trained man of science, believe it to be supernatural? I do not know what to believe. Holmes shrugged his shoulders. I have hitherto confined my investigations to this world, said he. In a modest way I have combated evil, but to take on the father of evil himself would perhaps be too ambitious a task. Yet you must admit that the footmark is material. The original Hound was material enough to tug a man's throat out, and yet he was diabolical as well. I see that you have quite gone over to the supernaturalists. But now, Dr. Mortimer, tell me this. If you hold these views, why have you come to consult me at all? You tell me in the same breath it is useless to investigate Sir Charles's death, and that you desire me to do it. I did not say that I desired you to do it. Then how can I assist you? By advising me as to what I should do with Sir Henry Baskerville, who arrives at Waterloo Station— Dr. Mortimer looked at his watch— in exactly 1 hour and a quarter. He being the heir? Yes, on the death of Sir Charles we inquired for this young gentleman, and found he had been farming in Canada. From the accounts which have reached us, he is an excellent fellow in every way. I speak now not as a medical man, but as a trustee and executor of Sir Charles's will. There's no other claimant, I presume? None. The only other kinsman who we have been able to trace was Roger Baskerville, the youngest of 3 brothers, of whom poor Sir Charles was the elder. The younger brother, who died young, is the father of this lad Henry. The third, Roger, was the black sheep of the family. He came of the old masterful Baskerville strain, and was the very image, they tell me, of the family picture of old Hugo. He made England too hot to hold him, fled to Central America, and died there in 1876 of yellow fever. Henry is the last of the Baskervilles. In 1 hour and 5 minutes I meet him at Waterloo Station. I have had a wire he arrived at Southampton this morning. Now, Mr. Holmes, what would you advise me to do with him? Why should he not go to the home of his fathers? It seems natural, does it not? And yet consider that every Baskerville who goes there meets with an evil fate. I feel sure that if Sir Charles could have spoken with me before his death, he would have warned me against bringing this, the last of the old race, against the heir of great wealth, to that deadly place. And yet it cannot be denied that the prosperity of the whole poor bleak countryside depends upon his presence. All the good work which has been done by Sir Charles will crash to the ground if there's no tenant of the hall. I fear lest I should be swayed too much by my own obvious interest in the matter, and that's why I bring the case before you and ask for your advice." Holmes considered for a little time. "Put into plain words, the matter is this," said he. "In your opinion, there is a diabolical agency which makes Dartmoor an unsafe abode for a Baskerville. That is your opinion. At least I might go to the length of saying that there is some evidence that this may be so." "Exactly. But surely if your supernatural theory be correct, it could work the young man evil in London as easily as in Devonshire. A devil with merely local powers like a parish vestryman would be too inconceivable a thing." "You put the matter more flippantly, Mr. Holmes, than you would probably do if you were brought into personal contact with these things. Your advice, then, as I understand it, is that the young man will be as safe in Devonshire as in London. He comes in 50 minutes. What would you recommend?" "I recommend, sir, that you take a cab, call off your spaniel who is scratching at my front door, and proceed to Waterloo to meet Sir Henry Baskerville." "And then?" "And then you will say nothing to him at all until I have made up my mind about the matter." "How long will it take you to make up your mind?" 24 hours. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, Dr. Mortimer. I will be much obliged to you if you will call upon me here, and it will be of help to me in my plans for the future if you will bring Sir Henry Baskerville with you." "I will do so, Mr. Holmes." He scribbled the appointment on his shirt cuff and hurried off in his strange, peering, absent-minded fashion. Holmes stopped him at the head of the stair. "Only one more question, Dr. Mortimer. You say that before Sir Charles Baskerville's death, several people saw this apparition upon the moor." "3 people did." "Did any see it after?" "I have not heard of any." "Thank you. Good morning." Right. So, poor Dr. Mortimer is an excitable chap. Writing on your shirt, your skin a lot is happened, but the shirt cuff's a new one. Yeah. Shirt cuffs nicely starched are quite thick, not thick, nice and stiff, and take a pencil imprint quite neatly. It's not something that a more organised person might do. But if you've got anything you need to make a sudden note of, I think most of us will have written on the back of our hands. But yeah, it'll be with a stub of pencil. Rather than with ink or anything. It'll literally just be scribbled down. So, what do people think? She says, just as I down enough coffee to sink a battleship. You fully imagined him taking out a fountain pen. Yes, I think even Dr. Mortimer might be pressed at that. But yes, a stub of pencil in the waistcoat pocket would be entirely conceivable. But yeah, it would have the texture of cardboard, essentially. It would be starched. The collar and cuffs would be starched and therefore nice and stiff to write on. Also quite logical that the collar would be removable. I'm not sure about the cuffs. I'd need to check that. Life was hard before Google Calendar. When I used to work in retail, my God, the backs of my hands were just covered in notes and writing. Because no notebook survived contact with anyone's pockets for more than 5 minutes. Okay. Holmes returned to his seat with that quiet look of inward satisfaction which meant he had a congenial task before him. Going out, Watson? Unless I can help you. No, my dear fellow, it's the hour of action. I turn to you for aid. But this is splendid, really unique from some points of view. When you pass Bradley's, would you ask him to send up a pound of the strongest shag tobacco? It means rough. Okay? Thank you. It would be as well if you could make it convenient not to return before evening. Then I should be very glad to compare impressions as to this most interesting problem which has been submitted to us this morning. I knew that seclusion and solitude were very necessary for my friend in those hours of intense mental concentration during which he weighed every particle of evidence, constructed alternative theories, balanced one against the other, and made up his mind as to which points were essential and which immaterial. I therefore spent the day at my club and did not return to Baker Street until evening. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I found myself in the sitting-room once more. My first impression as I opened the door was that a fire had broken out, for the room was so filled with smoke that the light of the lamp upon the table was blurred by it. As I entered, however, my fears were set at rest, for it was the acrid fumes of strong, coarse tobacco which took me by the throat and set me coughing. Through the haze I had a vague vision of Holmes in his dressing-gown, coiled up in an armchair, with a black clay pipe between his lips. Several rolls of paper lay around him. God, the furniture must reek. Yeah. Absolutely. And just imagine the colour of the wallpaper. Caught cold, Watson? Said he. No, it's this poisonous atmosphere. I suppose it is pretty thick, now you mention it. Thick? It's intolerable. Open the window, then. You've been at your club all day, I perceive. My dear Holmes, am I right? Certainly, but how? He laughed at my bewildered expression. There is a delightful freshness about you, Watson, which makes it a pleasure to exercise any small powers which I possess at your expense. A gentleman goes forth on a showery and miry day. He returns immaculate in the evening, with the gloss still on his hat and on his boots. He has been a fixture, therefore, all day. He is not a man with intimate friends. Where, then, could he have been? Is it not obvious? Well, it is rather obvious. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Where do you think that I have been? A fixture also. On the contrary, I have been to Devonshire. In spirit? Exactly. My body has remained in this armchair, and has, I regret to observe, consumed in my absence 2 large pots of coffee and an incredible amount of tobacco. After you left, I sent down to Stamford's for the Ordnance Survey map of this portion of the moor, and my spirit has hovered over it all day. I flatter myself that I could find my way about. A large-scale map, I presume. Very large. He unrolled one section and held it over his knee. Here you have the particular district which concerns us. That is Baskerville Hall in the middle, with the wood around it. Exactly. I fancy the yew alley, though not marked under that name, must stretch along this line, with the moor, as you perceive, on the right, upon the right of it. He is not a man with intimate friends, roasted. Yeah, Watson does have friends, but he has clubbable friends. He doesn't have close friends he'd go visiting with. Have friends he'd play billiards with, perhaps. But not actual, close friends. This small clump of buildings here is the hamlet of Grimpen, where our friend Dr. Mortimer has his headquarters. Within a radius of 5 miles there are, as you see, only a very few scattered dwellings. Here is Laughter Hall, which was mentioned in the narrative. There is a house indicated here which may be the residence of the naturalist. Stapleton, if I remember right, was his name. Here are 2 moorland farmhouses, High Tor and Foulmire. Then, 14 miles away, the great convict prison of Princetown. Between and around these scattered points extends the desolate, lifeless moor. This, then, is the stage upon which tragedy has been played, and upon which we may help to play it again. It must be a wild place. Yes, the setting's a worthy one. If the devil did desire to have a hand in the affairs of men, then you're inclining yourself to the supernatural explanation. The devil's agents may be of flesh and blood, may they not? There are 2 questions waiting for us at the outset. The one is whether any crime has been committed at all. The second is, what is the crime and how was it committed? Of course, if Dr. Mortimer's surmise should be correct, and we are dealing with forces outside the ordinary laws of nature, there is an end of our investigation. But we are bound to exhaust all other hypotheses before falling back upon this one. I think we'll shut that window again, if you don't mind. It's a singular thing, but I find that a concentrated atmosphere helps a concentration of thought. I have not pushed it to the length of getting into a box to think, but that is the logical outcome of my convictions. Have you turned the case over in your mind? Yes, I have thought a good deal of it in the course of the day. What do you make of it? It is very bewildering. It has certainly a character of its own. There were points of distinction about it. That change in the footprints, for example.
Nice to meet you.
What do you make of
Imjaija.
it? In other words, he likes stewing in his thoughts. Yes. And indeed, yes, Holmes is going to suffocate himself. It's amazing he's lasted as long as he has. Mortimer said that the man had walked on tiptoe down that portion of the alley. He only repeated what some fool had said at the inquest. Why should a man walk on tiptoe down the alley? What then? He was running, Watson, running desperately, running for his life, running until he burst his heart and fell dead upon his face. Running from what? There lies our problem. There are indications that the man was crazed with fear before ever he began to run. How can you say that? I'm presuming that the cause of his fears came to him across the moor. If that was so, and it seems most probable, only a man who had lost his wits would have run from the house instead of towards it. If the gypsy's evidence may be taken as true, he ran with cries for help in the direction where help was least likely to be. Then again, who was he waiting for that night, and why was he waiting for him in the yew alley rather than in his own house? You think that he was waiting for someone. The man was elderly and infirm. We can understand his taking an evening stroll, but the ground was damp and the night inclement. Is it natural that he should stand for 5 or 10 minutes, as Dr. Mortimer, with more practical sense than I should have given him credit for, deduced from the cigar ash? But he went out every evening. I think it unlikely that he waited at the moor-gate every evening. On the contrary, the evidence is that he avoided the moor. That night he waited there. It was the night before he made his departure for London. The thing takes shape, Watson. It becomes coherent. Might I ask you to hand me my violin, and we will postpone all further thought upon this business until we have had the advantage of meeting Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville in the morning. So, wouldn't his footsteps be further apart if he was running? Yep. It's entirely... However, he was an elderly and unfit man. I don't know if you've seen really old runners. They tend to take the smaller steps rather than going for a full extension. So I think they would have been further apart than his normal pace. But I don't think in his case they would have been as far apart as, say, a younger man running. And yeah, it would look like he was running on tiptoes. Right, let me just have a quick check. Okay, next chapter is quite a long one, so I may well break halfway through the chapter if that's okay. Oops. Yeah, not necessarily immediately noticeable. It would be the deeper impressions of the footprints that would probably get someone's attention. If someone like Holmes was there, he'd be looking at measuring the different strides between the man's walking and running. But it wasn't, as we can see.
Welcome, Coffee Stream Bot.
Yeah, as I said, the next chapter is quite lengthy, so I think rather than end it now, I will see if I can find a hopping off point halfway through, if that's all right. Chapter 4, Sir Henry Baskerville. And no, I am not going to attempt the Canadian accent, which really he should have, okay? We're going to go with him being quite posh. Because he would, to a certain extent, have inherited his parents' accent. But Canadian is one I cannot even make a stab at. Because it's just not in my lexicon. So yes, chapter 4, Sir Henry Baskerville. Our breakfast table was cleared early, and Holmes waited in his dressing gown for the promised interview. Our clients were punctual to their appointment, for the clock had just struck 10 when Dr. Mortimer was shown up, followed by the young baronet. Yeah, exactly, Kate B. He would have had decent schooling at least, possibly a tutor, and he would definitely have inherited his father at least's accent. I don't know if you. Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm posh, but I don't speak like most of the people in this area, even though I grew up here. I speak like my parents did, or do. And they have closer to RP accents than I do. But I'm still closer to them than I am to the Thanet accent, which is the prevalent one here. Yeah, they did in the formative years. That's when one of the times your accent gets set. Unless you consciously go all out to lose it. I refer you to Mel Gibson as an example. Now, this is something I am just going to break briefly. I may not get back to reading this now. This is something that usually gets mucked up in the adaptations, is the description of Sir Henry Baskerville. Because he's very much presented as a hero archetype, not necessarily the heroic investigator, very much. Things happen to him and around him. But he is very much presented as a handsome young hero. So quite often he's cast as... You lose strong accents very easily, at least in France. It's something you kind of have to work at, I think. And it does depend upon your society as well, I suppose. thinking in terms of Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, who I gather in his native Austria, has an accent that is very much, would you like to go on my tractor? Which is one of the reasons he didn't do his own dubs in his earlier career. Because he just didn't sound heroic at all. He sounded like a farmer. Which is not to say farmers can't be heroic, but you know what I mean. Yeah. It does depend upon where you are and what language you speak, yeah. So yeah, Sir Henry tends to get cast in adaptations as, tall, handsome, quite buff, usually. And your classic romantic lead tends to get the whole, windswept novel cover casting. And the description is not quite the same. The latter was a small, alert, dark-haired, dark-eyed man about 30 years of age, very sturdily built, with thick black eyebrows and a strong, pugnacious face. He wore a ruddy-tinted tweed suit and had the weather-beaten appearance of one who has spent most of his time in the open air, and yet there was something in his steady eye and the quiet assurance of his bearing which indicated the gentleman. Combative. How can we put this? Ready for a fight. Not necessarily fist fight, but one who is not going to be reticent about backing up his arguments. He is... I think if he's determined to do something, he's got that air about him and expression on his face that he is going to take absolutely no shit. And indeed, studios like to cast pretty people. You have Holmes as lead, followed by Watson, who, talented as they are, generally aren't conventionally attractive, unless it's the Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law versions. Yeah, I know I keep coming back to the Granada adaptations, but the casting of Watson there was absolutely bang on to the books. Watson is the good-looking ladies' man. Holmes is a bit weird-looking, tall, gangly, a little bit skinny, and very analytical expression at all times for the most part, at least when dealing with strangers. Whereas Watson is good-looking, well-built once he gets over the fever and having been shot, above medium height, and generally likeable. So it's always very odd to me when you get Sir Henry cast as, Christopher Lee, for example. And Watson as, the Nigel Bruces of this world. No shade on him as an actor, but really no. Not the sort who certainly Holmes would treat as his way of getting information out of ladies by being friendly to them. "This is Sir Henry Baskerville," said Dr. Mortimer. "Why, yes," said he, "and the strange thing, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, that if my friend here had not proposed coming round to you this morning, I should have come on my own account. I understand that you think out little puzzles, and I've had one this morning which wants more thinking out than I am able to give it." "Pray take a seat, Sir Henry. Do I understand that you yourself have had some remarkable experience since you arrived in London?" "Nothing of much importance, Mr. Holmes, only a joke as like as not. It was this letter, if you can call it a letter, which reached me this morning." He laid an envelope upon the table, and we all bent over it. It was of common quality, greyish in colour. The address, Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hotel, was printed in rough characters, the postmark Charing Cross, and the date of posting the preceding evening. Yes, you did indeed, this morning, get a letter that was posted the previous evening. Remember the wonders of the Victorian Postal Service. Jeremy Brett is a fail on that front, very pretty. Yeah. Jeremy Brett managed to almost physically camouflage the fact that he was a very, very good-looking man. If Holmes and Watson were dogs, what breed would you make them? Holmes are greyhounds. Greyhound or a lurcher, I would say. I personally wouldn't put Watson as a bulldog. To a certain extent, I think Watson is more possibly golden retriever. But he is also quite capable physically, and he's not in the slightest bit silly. So actually, I could almost see German Shepherd / Alsatian for Watson. But it depends upon which bloodline you're following. Not one of the ones with the dodgy hips, let's put it that way. But yes, one of the racing or hunting breeds for Holmes, I think. Who knew that you were going to the Northumberland Hotel? Asked Holmes, glancing keenly across at our visitor. No one could have known. We only decided after I met Dr. Mortimer. But Dr. Mortimer was no doubt already stopping there. 3. No, I've been staying with a friend, said the doctor. There was no possible indication that we intended to go to this hotel. Someone seems to be very deeply interested in your movements. Out of the envelope, he took a half sheet of foolscap paper, folded into 4. This he opened and spread flat on the table. Across the middle of it, a single sentence had been formed by the expedient of pasting printed words upon it. It ran, "As you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor." The word moor only was printed in ink. Hey, Niblick. Welcome. Now, said Sir Henry Baskerville, perhaps you will tell me, Mr. Holmes, what in thunder is the meaning of that, and who is it that takes so much interest in my affairs? What do you make of it, Dr. Mortimer? You must allow that there is nothing supernatural about this, at any rate. No, sir, but it might very well come from someone who was convinced that the business is supernatural. What business? Asked Sir Henry sharply. It seems to me that all of you gentlemen know a great deal more than I do about my own affairs. You shall share our knowledge before you leave this room, Sir Henry. I promise you that, said Sherlock Holmes. We will confine ourselves for the present, with your permission, to this very interesting document, which must have been put together and posted yesterday evening. Have you yesterday's Times, Watson? It's here in the corner. Might I trouble you for it? The inside page, please, with the leading articles. He glanced swiftly over it, running his eyes up and down the columns. Capital article, this, on free trade. Permit me to give you an extract from it. You may be cajoled into imagining that your own special trade or your own industry will be encouraged by a protective tariff, but it stands to reason that such legislation must, in the long run, keep away the wealth from the country, diminish the value of our imports, and lower the general conditions of life in this island. Wow, okay, that's weirdly relevant for this week. "What do you think of that, Watson?" cried Holmes in high glee, rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. "Don't you think it's an admirable sentiment? Dr. Mortimer looked at Holmes with an air of professional interest, and Sir Henry Baskerville turned a pair of puzzled dark eyes upon me. "I don't know much about the tariff and things of that kind," said he, "but it seems to me we've got a bit off the trail so far as that note is concerned." "On the contrary, I think we are particularly hot upon the trail, Sir Henry. Watson here knows more about my methods than you do, but I fear that even he has not quite grasped the significance of this sentence." "No, I confess that I see no connection." "And yet, my dear Watson, there is so very close a connection that the one is extracted out of the other. You, your, life, reason, value, keep away, from thee. Don't you see now whence those words have been taken?" "By thunder, you're right. Well, if that isn't smart," cried Sir Henry. If any possible doubt remained, it is settled by the fact that keep away and from the are cut out in one piece. "Well, now, so it is." "Really, Mr. Holmes, this exceeds anything which I could have imagined," said Dr. Mortimer, gazing at my friend in amazement. "I could understand anyone saying that the words are from a newspaper, but that you should name which, and add that it came from the leading article, is really one of the most remarkable things which I've ever known. How did you do it?" "Okay. Inappropriate language here, okay? I presume, Doctor, that you could tell the skull of a Negro from that of an Eskimo?" "Most certainly. But how?" "Because that is my special hobby. The differences are obvious. The supraorbital crest, the facial angle, the maxillary curve. But this is my special hobby, and the differences are equally obvious. There is as much difference to my eyes between the leaded bourgeois type of a Times article and the slovenly print of an evening halfpenny paper as there could be between your Negro and your Eskimo. The detection of types is one of the most elementary branches of knowledge to the special expert in crime, though I confess that once when I was very young I confused the Leeds Mercury with the Western Morning News. But a Times leader is entirely distinctive, and these words could have been taken from nothing else. As it was done yesterday, the strong probability was that we should find the words in yesterday's issue." Yeah, it's just the common language at the time. No slur meant, no insult intended. Yeah, it is. It is very much French Canadian. The spelling of Eskimo. When I was little and I read this first, I actually sat there and I was going, "What?" Until I actually sounded it out and went, "Oh." But yeah, that's French Canadian spelling, which is not one that got passed down. So far as I have found by my reading, when I was checking into it. But I had forgotten that we got that reference there. But yes, that was purely descriptive and not, as I said, in terms of a slur. "As far as I can follow you then, Mr. Holmes," said Sir Henry Baskerville, "someone cut out this message with the scissors." "Nail scissors," said Holmes. "You can see that it was very short-bladed scissors, since the cutter had to take 2 snips over keep away." "That is so. Someone then cut out the message with a pair of short-bladed scissors, pasted it with paste—" "Gum," said Holmes. "With gum onto the paper. But I want to know why the word more should have been written." "Because he could not find it in print. The other words were all simple and might be found in any issue, but more would be less common." "Why, of course, that would explain it. Have you read anything else in this message, Mr. Holmes?" "There are 1 or 2 indications, and yet the utmost pains have been taken to remove all clues. The address, you observe, is printed in rough characters, but the Times is a paper which is seldom found in any hands but those of the highly educated. Oh, how times change." We may take it, therefore, that the letter was composed by an educated man who wished to pose as an uneducated one, and his effort to conceal his own writing suggests that the writing might be known, or come to be known, by you. Again, you will observe that the words are not gummed on in an accurate line, but that some are much higher than others. Life, for example, is quite out of its proper place. That may point to carelessness, or it may point to agitation and hurry upon the part of the cutter. On the whole, I incline to the latter view, since the matter was evidently important, and it's unlikely that the composer of such a letter would be careless. If he were in a hurry, it opens up the interesting question, why should he be in a hurry, since any letter posted up to early morning would reach Sir Henry before he would leave his hotel? Did the composer fear an interruption, and from whom? Wow, there's an indicator of different postal expectations, isn't it? Your handwriting is terrible. If you want strangers to read it, you make a point to print in block capitals. That's fair. We are coming now rather into the region of guesswork, said Dr. Mortimer. Say rather into the region where we balance probabilities and choose the most likely. It is the scientific use of the imagination, but we have always some material base on which to start our speculation. Now, you would call it a guess, no doubt, but I am almost certain that this address has been written in a hotel. How in the world can you say that? If you examine it carefully, you will see that both the pen and the ink have given the writer trouble. The pen has sputtered through twice in a single word, and has run dry 3 times in a short address, showing that there was very little ink in the bottle. Now, a private pen or ink bottle is seldom allowed to be in such a state, and the combination of the two must be quite rare. But you know the hotel ink and the hotel pen, where it's rare to get anything else. Yes, I have very little hesitation in saying that we could examine the waste paper baskets of the hotels around Charing Cross until we found the remains of the mutilated Times leader. We could lay our hands straight upon the person who sent this singular message. Hello, what's this? He was carefully examining the foolscap, upon which the words were pasted, holding it only an inch or 2 from his eyes. Well? Nothing, he said, throwing it down. It's a blank half-sheet of paper without even the watermark upon it. I think we have drawn as much as we can from this curious letter. And now, Sir Henry, has anything else of interest happened to you since you've been in London? Why, no, Mr. Holmes, I think not. You've not observed anyone follow or watch you? I seem to have walked right into the thick of a dime novel, said our visitor. Why in thunder should anyone follow or watch me? We're coming to that. You have nothing else to report to us before we go into this matter. Well, it depends upon what you think worth reporting. I think anything out of the ordinary routine of life well worth reporting. Sir Henry smiled. I don't know much of British life yet, for I spent nearly all my time in the States and in Canada, but I hope that to lose one of your boots is not part of the ordinary routine of life over here. You've lost one of your boots? My dear sir, cried Dr. Mortimer, it's only mislaid. You'll find it when you return to the hotel. What's the use of troubling Mr. Holmes with trifles of this kind? Well, he asked me for anything outside the ordinary routine. Exactly, said Holmes. However foolish the incident may seem, you've lost one of your boots, you say. Well, mislaid it anyhow. I put them both outside my door last night, and there was only one in the morning. I could get no sense out of the chap who cleans them. The worst of it is I only bought the pair last night on the Strand, and I've never had them on. If you've never worn them, why did you put them out to be cleaned? They were tan boots, and had never been varnished. That's why I put them out. Then I understand that on your arrival in London yesterday you went out at once and bought a pair of boots. I did a good deal of shopping. Dr. Mortimer here went round with me. You see, if I'm to be squire down there, I must dress the part. And it may be that I've got a little careless in my ways out west. Among other things, I bought these brown boots, gave $6 for them, and had one stolen before ever I had them on my feet. It seems a singularly useless thing to steal, said Sherlock Holmes. I confess that I share Dr. Mortimer's belief that it will not be long before the missing boot is found. And now, gentlemen, said the baronet with decision, It seems to me I've spoken quite enough about the little that I know. It's time you kept your promise and gave me a full account of what we're all driving at. Yes, he's had a boot stolen. And brown boots would have needed varnishing in order to be waterproofed. Whereas black boots would have had boot black polish. Your request is a very reasonable one, Holmes answered. Dr. Mortimer, I think you could not do better than to tell your story as you told it to us. Thus encouraged, our scientific friend drew his papers from his pocket and presented the whole case as he had done upon the morning before. Sir Henry Baskerville listened with the deepest attention and with an occasional exclamation of surprise. Yep, whoever took that boot could have taken both. Well, I seem to have come into inheritance with a vengeance, said he, when the long narrative was finished. Of course, I've heard of the Hound ever since I was in the nursery. It's the pet story of the family, though I never thought of taking it seriously before. But as to my uncle's death, well, it all seems boiling up in my head, and I can't get it clear yet. You don't seem quite to have made up your mind whether it's a case for the policeman or the clergyman. Precisely. And now there's this affair of the letter to me at the hotel. I suppose that fits into its place. Both is theft and one is a prank. Yeah. I mean, there's basically an assumption that, did the person who'd be cleaning the boots wander off with them? But yeah, were it me, I'd have taken both. That's just me. It seems to show that someone knows more than we do about what goes on upon the moor, said Dr. Mortimer. And also, said Holmes, that someone is not ill-disposed towards you, since they warn you of danger. Or it may be that they wish, for their own purposes, to scare me away. Well, of course, that is possible also. I am very much indebted to you, Dr. Mortimer, for introducing me to a problem which presents several interesting alternatives. But the practical point which we now have to decide, Sir Henry, is whether it is or is not advisable for you to go to Baskerville Hall. Why should I not go? There seems to be danger. Do you mean danger from this family fiend, or do you mean danger from human beings? Well, that is what we have to find out. Whichever it is, my answer's fixed. There's no devil in hell, Mr. Holmes, and there's no man upon earth who can prevent me from going to the home of my own people, and you may take that to be my final answer. His dark brows knitted and his face flushed to a dusky red as he spoke. It was evident that the fiery temper of the Baskervilles was not extinct in this, their last representative. Meanwhile, said he, I have hardly had time to think over all that you've told me. It's a big thing for a man to have to understand and to decide at one sitting. I should like to have a quiet hour by myself to make up my mind. Now look here, Mr. Holmes, it's 11:30 now, and I'm going back right away to my hotel. Suppose you and your friend Dr. Watson come round and lunch with us at 2. I'll be able to tell you much more clearly then how this thing strikes me. Is that convenient to you, Watson? Perfectly. Then you may expect us. Shall I have a cab called? I'd prefer to walk, for this affair has flurried me rather. I'll join you in a walk, with pleasure, said his companion. Then we meet again at 2:00. Au revoir and good morning. We heard the steps of our visitors descend the stair and the bang of the front door. In an instant Holmes had changed from the languid dreamer to the man of action. He seems like he'd fight the Hound barehanded. He does. He really does. He is very much both fist up, and he is not putting up with this shit at all. Sir Henry's wonderful. And he is so often presented as either stupid or just a pretty boy. Yeah, fuck that. These are my people and my home. Exactly. Your hat and boots, Watson, quick. Not a moment to lose. He rushed into his room in his dressing gown and was back again in a few seconds in a frock coat. We hurried together down the stairs and into the street. Dr. Mortimer and Baskerville were still visible about 200 yards ahead of us in the direction of Oxford Street. Shall I run on and stop them? Not for the world, my dear Watson. I am perfectly satisfied with your company if you will tolerate mine. Our friends are wise, for it is certainly a very fine morning for a walk. He quickened his pace until we had decreased the distance which divided us by about half. Then, still keeping 100 yards behind, we followed into Oxford Street and so down Regent Street. Once our friend stopped and stared into a shop window, upon which Holmes did the same. An instant afterwards he gave a little cry of satisfaction, and, following the direction of his eager eyes, I saw that a hansom cab with a man inside, which had halted on the other side of the street, was now proceeding slowly onward again. There's our man, Watson. Come along. We'll have a good look at him if we can do no more. Compared to Holmes, none of us are bright. Yeah. Irritates you so much when the adaptations persuade Watson is stupid too. Yeah. On this hill I will die, and I know I've said it before. Watson's not stupid. Watson's very intelligent. He's just not Holmes brilliant. He is better at talking to people and putting them at their ease. He is more of a people person in general than Holmes. But yeah, it takes a lot to be a doctor. At that instant I was aware of a bushy black beard and a pair of piercing eyes turned upon us through the side window of the cab. Instantly the trapdoor at the top flew up, something was screamed to the driver, and the cab flew madly off down Regent Street. Holmes looked eagerly round for another... Pardon me. Holmes looked eagerly round for another, but no empty one was in sight. Then he dashed in wild pursuit amid the stream of the traffic, but the start was too great, and already the cab was out of sight. There now, said Holmes bitterly as he emerged, panting and white with vexation from the tide of vehicles. Was ever such bad luck and such bad management too? Watson, if you are an honest man, you will record this also and set it against my successes. Who was the man? I have not an idea. A spy? Well, it was evident from what we've heard that Baskerville has been very closely shadowed by someone since he's been in town. How else could it be known so quickly that it was the Northumberland Hotel which he had chosen? If they had followed him the first day, I argued that they would follow him also the second. You may have observed that twice strolled over to the window while Dr. Mortimer was reading his legend. He's just standing. Yeah. Watson looks worse standing next to Holmes. Almost anyone's better at people than Holmes. Holmes understands people analytically. He understands people and emotions in terms of motives and driving forces, but less so generally speaking. Although not exclusively as people. He has been shown to be very caring towards some of his clients who are having absolute conniptions. He knows them, but he doesn't understand them to a certain extent. Yeah, I just think he's not terribly interested in emotional context, except as it provides motives and connections that can be tracked down. Well, it was evident... Sorry, no, done that bit. I twice strolled over to the window while Dr. Mortimer was reading his legend. Yes, I remember. I was looking out for loiterers in the street, but I saw none. We're dealing with a clever man, Watson. This matter cuts very deep, and although I have not finally made up my mind whether it's a benevolent or a malevolent agency which is in touch with us, I am conscious always of power and design. When our friends left, I at once followed them in the hopes of marking down their invisible attendant. So wily was he that he had not trusted himself upon foot, but he had availed himself of a cab so that he could loiter behind or dash past them and so escape their notice. His method had the additional advantage that if they were to take a cab, he was all ready to follow them. It has, however, one obvious disadvantage. It puts him in the power of the cabman. Exactly. What a pity we did not get the number. My dear Watson, clumsy as I have been, you surely do not seriously imagine that I neglected to get the number. Number 2704 is our man, but it is no use to us for the moment. I fail to see how you could have done more. On observing the cab, I should have instantly turned and walked in the other direction. I should then at my leisure have hired a second cab and followed the first at a respectful distance, or, better still, have driven to the Northumberland Hotel and waited there. When our unknown had followed Baskerville home, we should have had the opportunity of playing his own game upon himself and seeing where he made for. As it is, by an indiscreet eagerness, which was taken advantage of with extraordinary quickness and energy by our opponent, we betrayed ourselves and lost our man. He's uninterested in anything that isn't related to crime, and that includes social niceties. He also canonically doesn't know that the sun is the centre of the solar system. He knows, he just keeps forgetting because he doesn't care.
Nice to meet you. In Jaija.
It is useless knowledge to him. I suspect if he was investigating the murder of an astrologer, then that knowledge might become relevant tangentially. It wasn't invented by BBC Sherlock's fandom. What, that he doesn't know that the sun is the centre of the solar system? No, that's from A Study in Scarlet. Basically, when they start sharing rooms, Watson has very little else to do. He's recovering from illness and injury. He hasn't got much money, so he's basically got a club and his slightly weird roommate, who he basically just starts observing and making notes about because he wants to investigate him. He has no idea what he's like. He's only had one meeting before they sign a lease for a suite of rooms. And his roommate has visitors turning up at all hours. You think he was teasing Watson when he said that? I think he was teasing him to a certain extent, but also I think he just doesn't care. It's not something he feels the need to keep track of. Sherlock Holmes, Watson's friend and hobby. Yeah. So, for the Watson is a dimwit crowd, Watson gets involved in The Study in Scarlet because he's been observing his roommate, his flatmate, for a while and looking at all the comings and goings and describing the various visitors, including, as described, a little rat-faced man who is actually Inspector Lestrade. And it's at that point, after a little while of that Holmes basically brings him in because he has decent observational skills. Essentially cutting out some of the chaff. It's that Watson is of a similar frame of mind, just at a different level. In your teeth, Lestrade, yeah. I always see Lestrade as a very ferrety person. Again, that's something that the Granada adaptation got right, but so rarely happens elsewhere. They like casting Lestrade as a sort of a lumpen, slightly dense, very hidebound and conventional officer, whereas Holmes in The Study in Scarlet describes Lestrade as about the best of the bunch of Scotland Yard. Holmes wouldn't be friends with someone who couldn't keep up with him. Exactly. Yeah, he says in one story Watson has a good eye for colour when asked to describe a female client. Yeah. Watson does have extremely good descriptive abilities, but what he tends to latch onto are different things to what Holmes tends to notice. The one in which the lady reports her fiancé's gone missing. Yeah. A question of identity. Yeah, he doesn't necessarily think that Lestrade's a moron. But again, Lestrade is just, once again, not Sherlock. Yeah. We had been sauntering slowly down Regent Street during this conversation, and Dr. Mortimer with his companion had long vanished in front of us. "There is no object in our following them," said Holmes. "The shadow has departed and will not return. We must see what further cards we have in our hands and play them with decision. Could you swear to that man's face within the cab?" "I could swear only to the beard." "And so could I, from which I gather that it is in all probability it was a false one. A clever man upon so delicate an errand has no use for a beard save to conceal his features. Come in here, Watson." He turned into one of the district messenger offices, where he was warmly greeted by the manager. "Oh, Wilson, I see you have not forgotten the little case in which I had the good fortune to help you." "No, sir, indeed I have not. You saved my good name and perhaps my life." "My dear fellow, you exaggerate. I have some recollection, Wilson, that you had among your boys a lad named Cartwright, who showed some ability during the investigation." "Yes, sir, still with us." "Could you ring him up?" "Thank you, and I should be glad to have change of this £5 note." A lad of 14, with a bright, keen face, had obeyed the summons of the manager. "Don't worry about it, Hiram, you're good." He stood now gazing with great reverence at the famous detective. "Let me have the hotel directory," said Holmes. "Thank you. Now, Cartwright, there are the names of 23 hotels here, all in the immediate neighbourhood of Charing Cross. Do you see?" "Yes, sir." "You will visit each of these in turn." "Yes, sir." "You will begin in each case by giving the outside porter 1 shilling. Here are 23 shillings. "Yes, sir." "You will tell him that you want to see the waste paper of yesterday. You will say that an important telegram has miscarried and that you are looking for it. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "But what you're really looking for is the centre page of the Times with some holes cut in it with scissors. Here's a copy of the Times. It's this page. You could easily recognise it, could you not?" "Yes, sir." "In each case the outside porter will send for the hall porter, to whom also you will give 1 shilling. Here are 23 shillings. You will then learn in possibly 20 cases out of the 23 that the waste of the day before has been burned or removed. In the 3 other cases you will be shown a heap of paper, and you will look for this page of the Times among it. The odds are enormously against you finding it. There are 10 shillings over in case of emergencies. Let me have a report by wire at Baker Street before evening. And now, Watson, it only remains for us to find out by wire the identity of the cabman number 2704, and then we will drop into one of the Bond Street picture galleries and fill in the time until we're due at the hotel." Okay, didn't have to cut it there. Ran somewhat later than I intended. So, by the way, ringing up the young guy, Cartwright, is a matter of ringing a bell for him rather than calling him or anything. So, they are set up to examine the Northumberland Hotel and investigate the case of the missing boot